This is the Ramana Maharshi 40 Verses on Reality Satsang, a time for self-reflection and self-inquiry. Know yourself and be always free and at peace. I'm Richard Clarke, hosting this satsang. Welcome. I'm a seeker like you, sharing what we love. I have been blessed with years of deep teaching and practice, and I bring this to this satsang. This week's reading from 40 Verses on Reality is verse 10. Ramana's words: ordinary knowledge is always accompanied by ignorance, and ignorance by knowledge. The only true knowledge is that by which one knows the self, through enquiring whose is the knowledge and the ignorance. Ordinary knowledge is knowledge of the mind, reflected knowledge, not direct knowledge. It is reflected knowledge since the mind uses reflected consciousness to light it up with awareness. Direct knowledge is the immediate knowledge that comes as is an integral part of your own existence. Direct knowledge only happens now, in this instant. When I say imaginations, this is not about whether the world is real or the world is unreal. Rather, it is about how we know anything. Our senses perceive. The nerves send signals to the brain, and the brain lights up in such a way that we think we perceive a world and objects in it. Whether the world exists or doesn't exist, the mental processes are what is known in your awareness. Whether it might be from an outside world or entirely from within you, as last night's dream, it makes no difference. There is an image in the brain, and what you experience is this image. Since the self is not an object, it cannot be known by the senses or the mind. The mind only knows objects. The self, though, is very much known as the base of every thought and experience, as the substratum of reality on which reality rests. Only the self can know the self. What is not the self is not real. It is not the lasting reality. It comes and goes like dust in the winds. How can what is not real really know anything? What's called in this verse ordinary knowledge is mental, conceptual, a model of reality, a model complete with desires, aversions, attachments, and fears. The self is known as direct knowledge, like how you know you exist. How do you know the self? Why, directly, through something like self-inquiry, maybe using forms of inquiry such as, who knows this? or for whom is this? This inquiry may bring a blankness of mind. This blankness is known. Who knows this blankness? This knowledge, deeper than the mind, is knowledge that doesn't depend on the mind. This is true knowledge. True knowledge is known, just not by the mind. Some notes for practice. Consider the story of a snake seen in a dark room. When turning the light on, it is seen only as a rope. What is the benefit in wondering about details of the snake, its history, and the color of its scales? What is unreal and has no existence. Ignorance is unreal. When you inquire who knows, what do you find? Is it the mind, thoughts, feelings? Who knows this mind? When you look to know your existence, who knows this existence? When you inquire, for whom is this? Is it for the mind or something deeper that knows the mind? Now to our videos for the week. First is Swami Sarvapriyananda saying, remain aware of our true nature.
How can my mind always be tagged to this pure consciousness in all my work and actions?
I think it's not just Pradeep in India, but a lot of people across the world. When they listen to non-duality first, they begin to understand, and then this question, inevitably it will come up at one point or the other. I see, yes, such a thing is there. It's like a serene, changeless being, consciousness. Very nice. But I don't seem to be somehow in that frame of mind when I'm driving, walking, talking, acting in the world. I'm mixed up. And that background reality is so nice. How can I be there all the time? There's a verse in the Mandukya, the second chapter, a very beautiful verse. The last verse of the second chapter of Mandukya Karika. Tattvam adhyatmikam drishtva, tattvam drishtva tu bahyata, tattvi bhuta stada rama, tattvada pratyuto bhavet. Very beautiful. You know what it says? It's an answer to this question. Seeing that reality, Brahman, within, and seeing that reality outside. You become that reality, you are that reality. And you find bliss and peace and completeness in that reality. And never slip away from that reality. The last quarter. Tattvad apratyuto bhavet. What do you become? You become that which can never slip away from that reality. I have a feeling the questioner would say, yes, that's what I want. Advaita Vedanta says that's what you already have. You've always had it. You suffer under this notion that I have slipped away from it. Even when you think that you have slipped away from it, you have not. Let's see how I can put it. There are many beautiful ways to put it. First of all, notice this one. I am that reality. It's not that reality, it's not Brahman, it's not Atman. We use all those terms, but those terms can be distancing sometimes. Yes, my Brahman is fine, but I have a problem. Atman is fine, my Atman is fine, like my liver is doing well. But I have a problem. Atman is you. It's literally you, your essence. Yeah, even if I say your essence, you say, yeah, Swami, my essence is fine, but I have a lot of problems in my job, in my family, in the day-to-day world. You are that reality. Let's talk about that openly. Instead of distancing it away as Brahman, Atman, or even the word Tattvam. Tattvam literally means an impersonal truth. So I am that. How can you ever be distanced from yourself? How can you ever slip away from yourself? What you can have, the objection might be, but I feel it. I get disturbed, I get angry, I get unhappy. Yes, that wrong notion can be there. That somehow there was a serenity and I've lost it. It was a serenity in the mind, and the mind has lost that serenity. You are the one which experienced the serene mind. You are the same one which has experienced the disturbing mind, the disturbed mind. The calm, relaxed, spacious, luminous mind and the agitated, turbulent mind. You are the same one. Whether it's a waveless, vast expanse or a turbulent ocean with waves and storms, it's the same water, literally the same water without any change at all. Even the ocean example is a little misleading, because you will say, no, Swami, but something is happening to that water. There's a lot of ups and downs. And yes, but the water nature is unchanged. Water has not become not water when it is in the middle of a storm. In the same way, whether you are in the depths of meditation, absolutely calm, quiet, the world forgotten, still, peaceful, or engaged in frantic action, in a high-pressure job, you are exactly the same unchanging awareness. It may not seem to be that, but you are that. Let me see how I can put it. The space example. So Mandukya uses a space example. Suppose you have different pots. And now the space, which seems vast and unlimited, seems to be cut up into different pots. The space inside the pot, in Sanskrit, Ghatakasha. And the space outside the pot, called Mahakasha. But literally, let me ask you, is the space actually cut off by the pot? The space which was here in Manhattan a few hundred years ago. Now we have so many densely packed buildings. Has the space been cut off? It's amazing. Yeah, it looks like that. Let me ask you an even simpler question. If you have a glass of water, half full, half empty. There's water and there is, it's filled with air, but let's forget the air part of it. There's space there, which there's no water in and there's space in where there's water also, but anyway, just empty space. Let's forget the air for the moment. Now when I move the glass from here to there, will the water inside move or not with the glass? All of you don't seem to be sure. This part you should be sure of, because the next part is more confusing. Yes, the water does move, otherwise it would make a very wet mess here. If I moved the glass and the water would splash down here. Swami, you forgot to take the water along with the glass. No, that doesn't happen. When you move the glass, the water moves with it. Now let me ask you, does the space move with it? When the glass is moving like this, the space circumscribed by the glass, that space inside, is it moving along with the glass? Is the space moving along with the glass? No. Tell me, does space move along with the container, the glass, or the glass is moving through space? Glass is moving through space. Yeah. When you cut up Manhattan into so many buildings, you have not enclosed space. Space has graciously permitted the buildings to exist within itself. Now, what can happen is, in one pot, there may be smoke and soot. Maybe you lit a fire or something. In one pot there may be holy Ganga water. In one pot they may have dirty water. In one pot there may be milk. Is the space polluted by the smoke in that pot? Is the space purified by the holy water of the Ganga river in that pot? Yeah. No. The pot might be affected. The pot gets affected. But space does not get affected at all. I noticed in India when a person dies and the body is burnt, the wood is burnt to ashes, and the water, there's a lot of water in the body, it vaporizes, and the air around it becomes very hot because the fire is burning. But the space, is it affected right there when the body is burning fiercely? The space is not affected. It's the air which becomes hot. It's the wood which becomes burnt into ashes. It's the water which is vaporized. Look at the 4 elements. They are affected. Earth, fire, water, air. Space, not affected. Similarly, whatever the contents in the mind, whatever the actions of the body, you, the pure consciousness, you are exactly always the same. You have not departed from your real nature as pure consciousness. How can I remain connected with that? What he is asking, I know. Because it's something that we also ask. I remember, I told you earlier, once I was sitting with a monk in Haridwar, and one young monk was discussing non-dualism very earnestly with the teacher, with the Swami, old Swami. And finally he said excitedly exactly this question, but Swami, we must at least hold on to that idea that I am Brahman. Aham Brahmasmi, yah chinta to karni chahiye. This much I must hold on to. And the Swami said, this is exactly what you must not hold on to. Because somehow I think I am Sarvapriyananda. It's like saying I must hold on to it. I must keep saying in the background, I am Sarvapriyananda, I am Sarvapriyananda. Otherwise I might forget. Who am I? Swami, you always ask, who am I? No, I never forget that. The difference between an actor who is acting as Hamlet or somebody in the open air Shakespeare there in Central Park in summer, that actor must always remember that I am Hamlet. Must keep in mind consciously. But suppose the actor's name is Mr. Scott. Does he have to keep remembering, I'm Scott, I'm Scott, I'm Scott? I must keep it in mind, otherwise I'll become Hamlet. No. Doesn't have to remember. In fact, to be a good actor must not even think about it. Must try to be Hamlet with all intensity. Similarly, the reality which we are, you don't have to keep thinking about it, otherwise I might forget. That happens at the beginning. Once we get an intuition of what is possible, what we really are, we want to be centered in that. And that's why this question comes, give me some technique so that I noticed what you're talking about. It's remarkable. And let me always remain like that. What Advaita says is, you always are like that. All right, one more point and we'll go on. Very important here. It is what actually a non-dualist teacher would say to this question. The difference between memory and experience. In Sanskrit, smriti and anubhava. The two are not the same, they do not go together. When you remember something, you are not experiencing it. When you are experiencing something, you are not remembering it, or you need not remember it. All right? Now I'm showing you a clock. Look at the clock. Will you say I'm seeing a clock or I'm remembering a clock? All right. Now close your eyes and visualize the clock. Will you say I'm seeing the clock or I'm remembering the clock? Remembering. Okay, you can open your eyes. This is the difference between anubhava, experience, and smriti. Advaita is experience. It's not a memory. It's not something I experienced earlier and then I'm trying to remember it now. The question is, how can I always remember I'm Brahman? No, don't remember you're Brahman, because you're always Brahman. It's always shining forth. It's just somehow we think it's not present to us. We think it seems to be hidden. That's why we think that we have to remember it all the time. If you are looking at me, you say, Swami, I'm seeing you. Yes, you're seeing me, but are you remembering me? Swami, I'm seeing you. Why do I have to remember you? When I don't see you, I might remember you. This is the difference between memory and experience. Non-dualism is based on an ever-present experience. It's blazing forth all the time. In fact, it's the only thing that's blazing forth all the time. And we have to recognize it. We don't recognize it. You might ask, all right, so how do I recognize it all the time? You don't have to recognize it all the time also. Once you recognize it, it's done. Only thing is, you are right. There might be a period in our spiritual practice when you need to dwell on it intensively for some period of time. But remember, that's also practice. That's not enlightenment. It's remembering an ever-present object. If you are trying to remember the clock when I'm showing it to you, you're doing something odd indeed.
And next is Mooji, and Mooji talks about the true knower.
Let's imagine something. How would it be if you had never heard anything about spirituality? No concept had been fed to you, hadn't read anything about it. Thank you. Never heard anything about spirituality. No one had said to you, this is something that you must be interested in. In fact, you didn't receive any teaching about anything at all. That you had to stand on your own feet. And anything that you discover had to be freshly your own inner experience for yourself. Nothing borrowed. How would you be as you are? Only speaking, communicating from your own direct inner experience. Not passing on something that merely you've read, felt a bit of interest in, but your own irrefutable truth, your own experience. Somehow these days I'm feeling a sort of an inner drive, a kind of urgency about conveying and talking about this subject of who we are actually. Not who we are supposed to be. Not who we've been taught we are. Who are you without your education, our conditioning? Just imagine. Because clearly we seem to have a strong sense that we're some composite of so many different influences, shape the way that we perceive, how we consider this existence, and who we are in it. How would it be if nothing could impregnate, nothing could enter, except if it was deeply your own truth? If it resonated, it was totally clear for you as your own truth. What exactly are you? Where are you? Where was your beginning? What shaped your beginning? If there is a beginning, do you know anything about it? Do you remember the point at which you began? How are you here now as you are? Because everything that has come to you in the form of knowledge, you were there prior to it, to receive it, to approve of it or to embrace it. What is it that was prior to knowledge, prior to conditioning, without which no conditioning could have taken place? For whom has conditioning happened? On what do they impact? Yes. What would we have to say? At that point, earlier than your conditioning, what is the evidence of you? How could you be described? Yes. So these kind of questions, generation after generation, some contemplate these type of questions. For a while, we were deeply engrossed with external or objective knowledge about this universe, about otherness, other than I. But for some, they're drawn inescapably to this question: who really am I? Who knows? What is the purpose of my existence? Everything that I seem to have acquired seems not to be stable. Everything is subject to change. Yet something witnesses all these changes. Throughout the growth or evolution of this farm that we call ourselves, our states of mind have changed so many times. How you describe yourself, how you perceive yourself to be, changes from one moment to another. How you would have described or defined the sense of yourself a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. If your memory was sharp, you could look and survey all of these changes and see that at different points in time, your sense of self has been altering constantly, like an ever-changing self-portrait. What is it that's been consistent throughout? What observes all these changes? From where do you observe them? I say, until these questions have sprouted in you, we remain asleep to the truth of ourselves. You may acquire all the worldly knowledge that's available, yes, and still feel an outcast to your own self. I think Christ also mentioned something very close. Of what value if you gain the whole world in exchange for your soul, if you don't know who you are? So somehow, provided within this enormous and endless manifestation is an opportunity. Something burns within us at some point, not for all at the same time. As they say, even on the same tree, not all the fruits come to ripe at the same time. What is this ripeness? This longing to be home. And what is home? For me, home is simply to be where you are, inescapably so. Home is something, real home, not an address with numbers and names, is simply to be as you are. When will you be as you are, if not now? What is the self? When we speak, everyone speaks about myself, yourself. What are we referring to? More often than not, we're referring to something that is describable. If it is describable, it must be some phenomena, some objective quality about it. And no object can exist unto itself. It must exist in the mind of the perceiver. Who is this perceiver? What is it? And who are you in relation to this perceiving activity? These are not questions that merely will bring about satisfaction at a thinking or intellectual level. It has to be so deeply realized that the one who knows it merges in it. The true knower is not separate from beingness. And what is the definition or form of beingness? There comes a time when there is such a powerful fascination with these questions that every other question concerning objects or otherness pales into insignificance. They lose their pull. You cannot create this pull. It has to be there.
And now we will listen to my teacher, Nome, talk about true knowledge.
The certitude of self-knowledge is found in the identity of that knowledge and being. In self-knowledge, the conception of I know this is absent. And so likewise, its corollary, the doubt, I do not know this, is also non-existent. In the knowledge so-called that is of a conceptual or perceptual character, I know this is a curious combination of the reality of our own being, the luminosity of our own consciousness, and some objective thought form. Self-knowledge is entirely non-objective. And in it, there is neither an individual knower nor an object known. The constancy, the ever-sameness of self-knowledge has nothing to do with what is perceived and conceived. It is not determined by any bodily or sensory state. It is not determined by any mental mode or state. The very nature of the knower himself is the knowledge. So this, therefore, is not a topic that can be studied. But direct experience, timeless experience, is solidly realized by a profound inquiry into that very knower, even the one that seems as if individualized, who, when caught up in the imagination of duality, says, I know this, I do not know this. If, as the Maharshi has instructed, we inquire into for whom is the knowledge, or for whom is the ignorance, and discern the real nature of I, that knowledge which so discerns is in substance the very knower himself. As Shankara has pointed out, Brahman alone is capable of knowing Brahman. The Maharshi has revealed self-knowledge, the self knowing itself, of itself, by itself. Who is it that could stand apart and say, I know this? Or who could doubt and say, This may be so, but I don't know this. Who is the one called I? In yourself. Can that one be a body, which is merely the known? An image projected within the mind by the mind in the waking state? Can that I be the mind, which, as Sri Bhagavan has said, is but a bundle of thoughts, inert in themselves? What is the definition of I? Your own nature. Is there one knower or a multiplicity of knowers? Is there a knower who is pure consciousness? And another one, be it called ego, mind, individual, soul, or what have you? If it would be a multiplicity, who would know the multiplicity? It still boils down to a single one. Inquire within yourself to perceive, not through the senses, of course, and not through mere thought, all of which is objective to you, but to perceive with real knowledge what in truth you are. That which is known as God, the Lord of all the universe, to those who perceive a world, is the very same thing that is known to those who deeply meditate as the consciousness which is the witness of all. And to those who inquire and know the self as it is, that very same one transcends all the previous definitions and abides as the unborn, uncreated absolute, for which there is nothing else to be witnessed, nor any object ever created. We should know our identity as that. Such knowledge does not come bodily, does not come conceptually. The knowledge is realized within yourself by a deep inquiry. Who am I? And when realized, it is found to be innate, identical with being. And as there is no second kind of being, be it an ego, a mind, or anything else, there is in truth no one in ignorance. Knowledge is not a possession of anyone, and there is no ignorant being. If the one who appears as if ignorant inquires to know his own nature, he finds only liberation, pure knowledge. And what he has found, he himself is. The certitude of this knowledge lies in being it. Being it does not mean a mode of mind, does not mean thinking about it. Being as knowledge is not a possession, nor can it be lost. The illusion which is not is gone. the knowledge sought is actually ever existent. Look deeply within yourself to understand what's being hinted at this morning.
And now we will meditate for a little bit, inquire, breathe in and out, long, slow breaths. Feel the breath as it comes in, as it goes out. And notice that you exist. You exist and you know that you exist. Without feeling it or thinking about it, you know that you exist. Now investigate within yourself. Who knows the mind? Does the mind know itself? Or do you know the mind? For whom is this inquiry? Is this inquiry for the mind or for something deeper? Who am I? All right. Let us close with a short chant. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om. Peace, peace, peace. Thank you for letting me share this teaching with you. This series on Ramana's 40 verses on reality will continue in the following weeks. If this satsang was of interest to you, I have more, a free book site, a YouTube site, and my blog. The URLs will be on the screen next.